superstars, Adele, Keith Urban, Julie Andrews. What do they all have in common? Well, yes, they have beautiful voices. But what you may not know is that they all entrusted one surgeon, Dr. Zeitels, when those beautiful voices started to slip away. And he's here today to tell us it doesn't just happen to stars. 1 in 10 of you might have a similar issue and not even know it. And the emotional impact this can have is massive on your life. It can change your life forever. I want to celebrate the medical advances that have helped save the most precious assets we have, the voice. The Voice Health Institute's 15th anniversary gala has drawn so many big-time artists, all who know firsthand what so many of us take for granted, the power and fragility of our voices. Now, there are singers here, they're big-time actors, and even sports announcers here, all honoring the groundbreaking work of Dr. Zeitels. They're going to share their stories, and most importantly, they're going to get the word out about voice health.
I think what people don't realize is the voice is incredibly fragile.
Vocal cords are these tiny little thin membranes that slam together 100 and something times per second.
They collide with the power of a punch.
It's quite an unseen miracle.
You think we take our voice for granted?
Well, I think until you start to learn how valuable it is, you do.
Singers definitely take their voices for granted.
The things that we do to our voices throughout the day, from screaming and walking into restaurants that are filled with smoke, we take them for granted way more than we should.
Voice loss would be devastating for anybody, but when your voice is your life's work, it's unimaginable.
It's emotionally exhausting thing for a singer to be told you've damaged your instrument.
I woke up from an operation and I couldn't speak. I didn't know if I had a future in my own profession.
I was devastated. All of a sudden my voice isn't really working.
It started to get hard and my voice got rough around the edges and singing became hard work. Fortunately, it wasn't cancer, it was precancerous.
Right after the operation, you actually weren't allowed to speak.
That was the worst bit of the whole experience. Was for 2.5, 3 weeks there, I didn't speak at all. And it was absolutely horrendous.
But tonight, we're here to celebrate.
Do you feel there's great hope for folks who have vocal cord problems today?
I do. I think that a lot of it has to do with Dr. Zeitels.
He has restored so many voices, brought back so many that didn't think they'd ever speak again.
That technology now is there, that we can all rest easier knowing that there are options for us if something goes wrong.
The future's incredibly optimistic. I'm still singing the high notes that I used to sing.
I was able to get back on my feet and back to 100%.
One last question. Can you teach me to sing, please?
I can help.
That may not have hope. Voice surgeon to the stars, and my good friend Dr. Zeitels is here. I got to say, I was struck by how emotional all these singers were while talking about their precious voices. It's their art, and the impact that you've had on them made them teary-eyed as I was interviewing them, which is stunning. As a physician, I respect you so much for gaining the confidence for these folks, but also being the go-to person for the entire world when people are having trouble. And I heard that again over and over again, so it's not just 1 or 2 celebs. How much pressure do you feel when you're operating on this itty-bitty thing that it's whacking together, what, 100 times a second?
For men.
For men, that's right.
200 for women.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. That's why women have more issues, or different issues than men.
Yes.
So how do you deal with that pressure?
I think one approaches those surgeries and understands there is a certain amount of pressure because of what these people are expected to do afterwards. It's one thing to bring back a conversational voice. It's another thing to bring back someone's dynamic range who's using 99% of their mechanical capability. It's a different level, and yes, you do feel pressure, but that heightens your awareness to be able to be just like an athlete or someone with a technical skill. That heightened awareness is what brings you to your best with every single individual.
And your clinic is not just full of on-air personalities and celebrity singers. In fact, this is not a problem that's only affecting them. It's probably 1 in 10 of us, right? It can happen to anybody.
Yes.
So what are the symptoms? What should folks at home right now be paying attention to identify a vocal cord issue?
One of the most common things that occurs is that individuals, when they meet strangers, say, "Are you sick? Why do you sound this way?" So when someone who you don't know says, "Is something wrong?" and you're not sick, that's a message that you have to take very loudly.
And what about the times in our lives when we feel we have to start pushing our voice, forcing it?
Sure, Mehmet. What ends up happening is that when you're in a room where you've been at an event or a party and you have to raise your voice over ambient noise that's going on from people talking. If you feel like you have to push too hard, that means there's something that's probably wrong.
So how do we change that natural history? What are the tips everyone ought to be adopting right now to take care of their voice?
Sure. I think the number one thing is hydration. You have to keep hydrated. The vocal folds require far more pressure to drive into vibration when they're dry. It's like when you're in the shower and singing in the shower. That's true.
We should sing in the shower.
Yeah.
Reprieve for all of us who sing.
Yeah.
Come on over here. My wife, she complains so vehemently that because I get up before her in the morning to come make the shows. Drinking water.
Sure.
Singing in the shower.
Yeah.
But you point out that the humidifiers have a huge opportunity.
What's key is if you're in a cold environment where there's dry heat and it's dry on the outside, all through New York, New England, the northern parts of the United States. So when you're breathing all night with your mouth open, you're losing water to the air, and sometimes up to a ½ liter just from breathing with your mouth open. So a humidifier helps that scenario, and then you just want to, we have this saying, you want to drink till you pee pale.
To your pee pale.
Yeah.
Yes, so you can read through your pee. Just one thing on the humidifier. So I always thought that it was important to keep the temperature up on these babies, but that's not apparently the case.
It's probably not. By the time in the air and the ambient air reaches you, it's probably room temperature. Most people are not steaming right into the device. What is key is there's a reservoir of fluid at the bottom, so they have to be constantly cleaned, or else you can be actually blowing fungus into the air.
Who wants to breathe fungus?
It's not a good idea.
And for all the coaches and school teachers and moms out there who have to project a lot to be heard,
yes.
What do they do?
Well, I mean, they've got to actually, if it's a classroom, they've got to get a certain amount of order, but otherwise, sometimes teachers halfway through their career start to require amplification. So they will use a device that makes it a little easier. And that can extend an individual's career, and the same thing with coaches. You listen to many coaches, and if they're in contained spaces like arenas and things, it is very difficult.
They sound like this after a while.
And you have to pay attention to that, because you don't know unless you're checked what's going on. So if it's persisting, you should be checked by somebody.
Raspy, sexy voice. Not to you?
Well, I know that if you hear something that doesn't sound smooth, there is something wrong. It doesn't mean it's dangerous. It doesn't mean you require surgery. But any human being, even a child, can actually perceive hoarseness. And all of us know people who would benefit from being checked, managed, and or operated on, because again, benign or malignant, most things have been present for 10 years. So we actually probably only treat a small fraction of the people who would benefit in any 1 year. Probably 1 in 50.
1 in 50. You all know someone, everyone at home too, you all know someone who's got a vocal cord issue, because we just told you what to look for. Hoarseness, pushing it a little bit, sounding like you're sick when you're not.
Yes.
So Dr. Zeitels has fixed the voices of some of your favorite singers. And up next, he's taking us inside the vocal cords of one of your favorite stars. See her incredible transformation and what it meant to her when we come back.
If you're injured like I was, you have to be silent, and that is not easy for this Italian gal. And so I was 100% hopeless, because I'd lose my voice all the time, cancel all these events, cancel shows. It was really, really hard. And when I met Dr. Zeitels, he literally handed me hope. He was like, oh, here's a book of all the singers that I've operated on. I'm going to fix you in 1 day. I was crying. It was like the best thing ever. And then on August 25th, 2011, he gave me my surgery. And I have never canceled one show, one performance, one interview, anything since that happened.
Pretty stunning. I'm back with voice surgeon to the stars, Dr. Zeitels. That was star singer Christina Perri. You know her from its Jar of Hearts and 1,000 Years. She was talking about the vocal cord surgery that changed her life forever. So Christina's allowed us to talk about her case.
Yes.
And she adores you, but like so many of these superstars, they gained new respect for their instrument. And it actually helped me understand a lot more about all of our voices, which is why I want to do this show today. What was her problem? And when she presented to you, what was the issue specifically that you were hearing?
So Christina had a normal speaking voice, but as her career ascended and she became more popular, there was a lot more required of her singing voice. And the pace and the performance expectations were elevating along with her career. And what singers have to do is so much more than what you and I do speaking. This is only maybe 10% of what our vocal cords are capable of doing when they vibrate. With Christina, and what many of these vocalists have to do is use 95 to 99%. So she lost her stamina and her high notes. When her vocal system was brought to the edge, she was simply failing, and that's what she was describing to you.
Right, so the problem she has actually could be a problem that a lot of folks have. So Dr. Zeitels, you agree to take us into Christina Perri's vocal cords. So come on back, and if you don't mind, sort of orient us to what we're going to see.
Sure. When individuals are examined by a throat surgeon or voice specialist, they use stroboscopy so you can slow down the vibration. Ultimately, her vocal cords, when you hear her, are vibrating 200 times per second.
Per second?
Per second. And you can't see that if you're looking with a regular scope. So with the stroboscope, it slows it down so it gives the appearance of that they're moving in slow motion. So we can see their vibratory pattern. It's a wonderful instrument that was actually designed in 1895 with a rotating pinwheel.
Oh, my goodness.
Just like the old-time cinematographers.
All right, so take us into her vocal cords.
So here we go. We're going to look at her now and how she looked when I met her in my office. On this side, you're seeing this round mass, that's white, and that was actually a congenital cyst. On the other side, from the cyst hitting it, she got a vocal nodule. That's where she starts failing as I elevate her pitch. So this she was born with and didn't even know it, and that was the effect of singing on top of the cyst against each other with collision and getting a vocal nodule.
It's
a callus. It is a callus. It is scar. It is trauma.
And it's supposed to look supple like that.
Totally. And her inability as she raised pitch to have suppleness and pliability is what leads to the voice failure.
Yeah, well, the beauty of understanding this is I realize how much we can do to make it better, which is why it's worth checking. Earlier, better than later, but no matter where you are. So walk us through how you fixed this wonderful woman's career and her vocal cords.
So what we're about to see is her microsurgery. It's massively magnified as I would see it in the operating room. And what you're seeing here is fluid going in there, and this is a tiny scissors that's 3 millimeters long. That is 1 millimeter. That's the size of a pen point. So the magnification, you see the serrations, and now I'm gradually dissecting with that tiny, tiny micro scissors from 1 foot away under a microscope to peel that out so that it doesn't rupture, because the surgery won't be effective if that ruptures. So these are very, very, very tiny instruments.
If that were to rupture, if you were to pop it, or if you were to cut the cord, what happens?
Well, if you cut the cord, she's never getting back on stage again. And this is tiny bits of mucosa that are 2 or 3 millimeters, and then that has to be removed. And then I have to go and remove the nodule on the other side, and that's even harder. It's scar, so you have to peel it off the under surface of what is essentially 5 cells.
And how are men and women different? Come on up.
So essentially, men in their conversational speech are 100 hertz or 100 collisions per second. Women are actually speaking normally roughly 200 times. So nodules are far more common in women. It can be school teachers, it can be coaches, athletes. People who get these type of vocal injuries are using their voice extensively.
And it's different for women than men. So after all this was done, let's just play it behind us. This is before and the after. You can see the pop in that one. And now on the other side, you see how beautiful it looks. Is she doing well?
She has not missed a show that I know of ever again.
I like it. Zeitels. All right. I want to thank Dr. Zeitels and Christina Perri for letting us use this footage, actually for letting us go inside of her body, inside of her vocal cords. God bless her. Up next, what surprised me the most about the power of the voice? It is a lesson that I will never forget. I bet you won't either. Stay around. I am back with voice surgeon to the stars, Dr. Zeitels. I recently went to an event to honor the work this man has done to save the voices of some of the biggest musicians, artists out there in our time, and the astounding medical innovations that are on the forefront of changing the voice of all of us. What struck me even more than the science was the emotional impact that his work had. Take a look.
It's an incredibly emotionally exhausting thing for a singer to be told, you've hurt your instrument.
I went into a doctor and he looked down and he said, yeah, just as I thought, you have a paralyzed vocal cord. And he said it could last 3 weeks, it could be forever. And with my kind of sky is falling mentality, all I clutched to was it could never come back.
For that whole year, I was hopeless. I was 100% hopeless because I'd lose my voice all the time, cancel all these events, cancel shows. It was really, really hard.
It made me realize what it must be like for people to lose their vocal cords, because once it gets so bad, if you get cancer in the vocal cords, they have to take them out, and then you really got problems.
I was down on my knees saying prayers that time would heal it, and eventually that happened.
So many of these artists, these superstars, confided they had huge emotional issues around their voice, which sort of caught me off guard. What do they go through?
So when folks are having difficulty with their voice, it's as if they're in an emotional jail. They have to always be wondering, is their voice going to be there to serve them? And their voices become the essence of who we are, because it's the ultimate human expression. So ultimately, people would say singing is the ultimate expression of emotion.
So after these surgeries, like the one you just told us with Christina, and this was shared with by a lot of the folks I spoke to, they weren't allowed to speak for 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah. That is an issue of, I just don't want them to re-injure themselves. And there's a little bit of a fear, because I warn them, I can't control how you heal. You have to be in control of that. And that means those tissues have to rest.
So
they need a few weeks.
What's the first thing they say, usually, when they can finally talk?
Is it okay? And then they've talked.
Then you know.
Yes, and it's quite wonderful, because they're waiting so anxiously, is it going to be there? And then that moment comes, especially with the performers, it's okay. And by 3 weeks, I'll actually let them start singing right in the office. And usually there's just a pent-up emotion, and many of them will actually start to cry, because they're concern and fear that the essence of who they are might not be there. And then when it is, it's just an outpouring of emotion.
Zeitels, congratulations. The Voice Health Institute, wonderful organization. Thanks for what you do. We'll be right back.